Few images in naval history are as striking as this one, the devastating sinking of HMS Barham, captured on high quality film for its day and showcasing the complete end of the ship, from her rolling over to the massive explosions that obliterated the veteran warship. Pieces of armor plate and crew flying in all directions. It has, for better or worse, become the poster child for battleship destruction, often put into use as stock footage for completely unrelated things, diluting the impact of the initial footage to my mind, but also making it even better known as time goes by. Just not as HMS Barham's sinking. Now, I covered Barham's story as a whole quite a while ago, one of my earlier videos. Today, we'll be looking at her sinking in specific. I'll admit that this video will be on the shorter end as a result, but I feel it's a topic that deserves its own video, similar to a couple others I've done lately, such as Mikuma. Right, with that disclaimer done, let's set the stage. Barham's sinking came as the culmination of her service in the Mediterranean theater. This largely revolved around convoy escort duty because the battleship was, frankly, outdated. Barham was nowhere near as heavily modernized as Queen Elizabeth, Valiant, or Warspite. This left her slower and less well protected than her sisters. In a theater like the Mediterranean, with an enemy like the fast Italian fleet, it limited what Barham could really do. She still had her successes, but those were generally in circumstances that couldn't be easily replicated, such as, for example, Cape Matapan, where Barham's speed wasn't an issue because sneaking up on rescue operations for a crippled cruiser didn't require high speed. Barham's guns would help in the destruction of Zara, Fiume, and Pola. It was a rare success, but also her last one as it turned out. Matapan took place at the end of March 1941, with the cruiser destruction coming on the night of March 29th. Barham would be damaged in turn, covering the evacuation of Crete on May 27th, resulting in 6 weeks of repairs in South Africa. I make note of this because it left her out of the war for nearly 2 months. And even when she returned in August 1941, Barham continued largely as she had been, escorting other ships, something that she would still be doing on November 25th, 1941. Not a convoy this time, though. Barham, alongside her sisters, Queen Elizabeth and Valiant, were actually providing cover for British cruisers, the 7th and 15th Squadrons to be specific, which were in turn hunting for Italian convoys. It was a change of pace for Barham, though less than you might expect. She wasn't expected to run down enemy ships after all. She was more there to ensure that Italian battleships didn't run down the British cruisers. It should still have been a pretty routine operation, all things considered. The British cruiser force, if you've watched my videos, was often used this way. They would sail from Alexandria or Malta to try and hunt down convoys between Italy and North Africa. This was done to try and cut off Rommel's supply line and take pressure off the ground forces. This specific group was sent out to hunt 2 convoys being sent to Benghazi. British intelligence had picked up indications of the 2 groups departing Italy in the 3rd week of November. While a valuable target, it was still a risky one. Italy wasn't yet out of the war after all, and the Germans were ramping up their own commitments to the theater. Not to mention the losses off of Crete that had severely weakened the Royal Navy. Nonetheless, Churchill pressed Admiral Cunningham to set out. To quote Struggle for the Middle Sea, stopping of those ships may save thousands of lives apart from aiding a victory of cardinal importance. When Churchill wires you to do something, even if you're leery of it, well, you kinda have to do it. Cunningham set sail with his battle fleet to support the cruisers, Force K and Force B. Despite the Admiral's reasonable concerns, there wasn't anything special about this operation. On the surface, that is. Beneath the surface, well, that was a different story. While not a well-studied part of the war, German U-boats would operate in the Mediterranean alongside their Italian counterparts. Never very many in the grand scheme of things, but they were certainly present. November 1941 was actually one of the most successful periods for those U-boats, with 26 of them in the theater. While not in the Mediterranean, you had one of those boats, U-81, sink Ark Royal just a couple weeks before Barham on November 14th. A catastrophic loss all on its own. And on the 25th, another one of those boats, U-331, spotted Barham's group. That submarine, under the command of Hans Dietrich von Tiesenhausen? That has got to be one of the most German names I've ever seen, began to stalk the formation. He had detected engine noises in the morning of the 25th. By the afternoon, U-331 had found her mark. The submarine went to battle stations around 4 p.m. as she crept ever closer to her target. It's here where things could have gone very poorly for the Germans. One of the great mischances of the Second World War. You see, as U-331 moved in, she was spotted on sonar, ASDIC, by HMS Jervis. The destroyer spotted the U-boat at around 900 to 1100 yards, 820 to 1010 meters. Incredibly close range when looking at the distances involved in naval engagements. Yet, the sighting was discarded. It seemed to be far larger than any submarine due to the angle U-331 was detected at. That was likely due to the fact the formation was zigzagging, interfering with the ASDIC signal, creating the angle that made the crew discount the sighting. Either way, Jervis continued on, and U-331 snuck through the British escort screen. It was the perfect scenario for any U-boat captain, sneaking past destroyers to line up a perfect shot at a British battleship. Or multiple battleships, as the case may be. Queen Elizabeth managed to move out of U-331's scope as the submarine moved forward at a snail's pace. Barham, however, sailed directly into view. She zigged at the worst possible time, giving a perfect broadside view to the German submarine. Tiesenhausen did not waste his chance. 4 torpedoes were sent out at a range of 410 yards, 375 meters, around 4:25 on November 25th, 1941. The sudden change in displacement, plus the closeness of Valiant's bow wave, forced U-331 to the surface. The conning tower breached the water, creating a perfect target. Unfortunately for the British, only a single pom-pom gunner was able to react fast enough. He fired at U-331 at only around 30 yards from the submarine. This was 15 seconds after Barham was hit, with U-331 coming to the surface 150 yards from Valiant. In addition to the pom-pom gunner, the officer of the watch ordered a change in course to try and ram the submarine. This would fail as U-331 was just too close to Valiant to turn in time, leaving the pom-pom to fire 19 rounds at the German boat. All the shots missed, and the submarine crash dived to safety. Well, relative safety. U-331 actually went down deep, something like 265 meters, 869 feet, very nearly twice her design depth rating of 150 meters, 490 feet. U-331 could easily have been a victim of her own success. As it turned out, though, the boat stabilized and rose to a safer depth, where she moved off without making another attack or verifying the damage she had done. The British destroyers were certainly watching out now, and Tiesenhausen wasn't planning on pushing his luck. He would radio in that he hit a Queen Elizabeth with one torpedo and leave it there. Of course, he had done far more than just that. Of the 4 torpedoes, 3 would slam home into HMS Barham, so close together that they threw up a single gargantuan column of water and smoke. The report by Valiant indicated that the observers on other ships noted 3 distinct impacts, one explosion followed by 2 others in quick succession. So while the impacts were functionally at the same time, they were still distinct enough to notice if you looked. It hardly mattered in the end. 3 torpedoes hitting so close together was far more than Barham could handle. As I noted, she was already one of the least modernized of the class. Her old torpedo defense system simply wasn't up to the task. I doubt even most modern battleships would have been. Such extensive damage, all in one area, would have caused crippling, if not fatal damage, to any ship. Barham's old hull was just uniquely vulnerable. Aboard the battleship, the damage was immediately apparent. Not even a minute after the hits, she had already developed a port list of 7 to 8 degrees. The officers gave orders to prepare lifebelts, as it quickly became apparent there was no chance of saving Barham. Her engines continued to drive the ship forward, but the damage had already been done. The list continued to grow, soon reaching 20 to 30 degrees. Valiant's report noted the battleship hanging in that position for about a minute before Barham rolled again. If she had just capsized at this point, that would have been bad enough, but not a disaster. A lost battleship was never a good thing, but much of the crew could probably be pulled off as Barham slipped beneath the waves. Unfortunately, the British would not be so lucky. As Barham continued to roll and sink deeper, water was seen entering the funnel. Shortly after this, a colossal detonation rang out amidships. At 4:30 p.m. on November 25th, 1941, HMS Barham blew apart. 4 to 5 minutes after she was hit, the ship was gone. We'll never truly know what triggered the fatal explosion. I've seen people argue it was a boiler explosion, at least initially, based on the sighting of water entering the funnel right before the fatal blast. With that boiler explosion setting off the magazines to produce, well, what you see here. On the other hand, the official inquiry attributed the explosion to a fire in the 4-inch magazines, with that fire spreading to the 15-inch main magazine, resulting in the Titanic explosion. The report from Valiant, citing Bert's British battleships, has a differing take, that the, quote, general opinion was the 6-inch magazines going up instead, based on the center of the explosion being aft of the bridge, but not so far back as the aft magazines. Or, if you prefer that in simpler terms, right where the secondary battery magazines would have been located. Regardless of the source of the explosion, the shattered remnants of HMS Barham quickly slipped beneath the waves, taking any men still clinging to her hulk down with her. Ultimately, 862 men were lost, 860 with the ship, and 2 from their wounds. The survivors, well, this varies on what source you're using, ranging from 396 to 450 overall, including the admiral in charge of the squadron, Rear Admiral Henry Pridham Whipple. And thus ends the story of HMS Barham. Her sinking would become one of the best known wartime films in history once her loss was admitted to. The British tried to hide the sinking at first, up to and including imprisoning a Scottish medium, Helen Duncan, for claiming to contact the spirit of a Barham sailor before the sinking was revealed. As for U-331, she would ultimately be sunk in turn on November 17th, 1942, almost exactly a year after she had sent Barham to the bottom. One of those historical ironies that sometimes pop up. And as one final note, her wreck has not, to my knowledge, been discovered. A company, Merlin Burroughs, has claimed they found it in 2017. But I have never seen any actual evidence of this. No scans, no images, nothing. I'm not saying they're lying, but in the lack of proper evidence, I can't exactly say they're telling the truth. If someone has found the actual scans, by all means let me know. Trust me, I'd be happy to be proven wrong on this one. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.